What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I'm your host, Emma Lingan, and I'm joined today by Michael Augello of the Hockey News, coming at you to talk about all of the latest and greatest storylines from around the NHL in bite-sized portions. But before we get into all of that, do want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, Mike, first big news of the week. Nick Schmaltz signed an 8-year contract extension with the Utah Mammoth, carries an $8 million AAV. Last year that these guys will be able to sign these lengthy contract extensions. So Schmaltz is finishing up a 7-year deal that he signed with, at that time, the Arizona Coyotes that carried a $5.85 million AAV. So hefty pay raise for him. He's second on the Mammoth in scoring with 59 points in 65 games this year. What do you think of this contract for the Mammoth and for Schmaltz? How do you see this aging over time?
Well, it's a tidy bit of work by GM Bill Armstrong. I think that Schmaltz is a good number 2 center, and he's being slotted in, especially with the way the salary cap is going up. $8 million is probably what a number 2 center is going to get paid for most teams. And if you look, they signed Logan Cooley early in the year. He's making $10 million. He's at Schmaltz is at 8. I mean, that's, $18 million for your top 2 centers with a cap going, could be over 100, maybe 120 in a couple years. And that's locked in for long term. I think that's a good piece of business. But I'll just say this: the free agent class on July 1st is completely gone. Alex Tuch has to be popping champagne because Schmaltz is gone, Cooley's gone, McDavid, Connor, all these players, every one of them is off the board. And Alex Tuch is sitting there counting his money in his head because he's having a good year at the Buffalo Sabres and nobody else is out there. And it just increases my suspicion that he's going to go to market on July 1st and will have his choice of a number of teams with a boatload of cap space that can go out there and sign him. So good piece of work by Utah and good fortune for Alex Tuch of the Buffalo Sabres.
Absolutely. And Utah obviously facing an uphill battle in that central division. So always good to get your top talent locked up long term while you can here. So I agree. Good bit of business there. Moving over to the East, the Montreal Canadiens called up their goaltending prospect, Jacob Fowler. He's a guy that we've talked about on the show before. He started against the Ottawa Senators on Wednesday. He made 32 saves to lead Montreal to a 3-2 win. He played 11 games for the Canadiens throughout the season. He's got a .906 save percentage and a 2.56 goals against. So solid numbers there in a small sample size. Of course, Fowler, just 21 years old. But Mike, do you see him being part of the Canadiens' crease in the playoffs this year, or do you see him as more of a future piece?
I see him more as a future piece. If they're going to Fowler as a 21-year-old, putting him into the crucible of the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think it's a little too much to ask. Now, he's done very well at the American League level. They called him up earlier in the year, but they have Dobish and Montembeault. I mean, I don't think that is going to be able to carry them to a Stanley Cup. I think Fowler is the goalie that eventually will, but it might just be too soon. I mean, he's having a good year with Laval in the American Hockey League. He's had, an excellent college career, an excellent career in the USHL. It's just too soon. If they were really concerned about making a run for a Stanley Cup, then they should have spent the assets and traded for Jordan Binnington or traded for Stuart Skinner or somebody else out in the market. Forcing a 21-year-old, I mean, there's precedent with Montreal going back to Steve Penny back in the day, and there was a lot of other goals. There was a goalie named Patrick Waugh that they put in very young, but I don't know if Jacob Fowler is that good. Carey Price they put in as a 20 or 21-year-old old goaltender. So there is a history in that organization of doing it. I just don't know whether it's feasible to put him in there and expect success in this Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, a lot to ask. We talked about that as well earlier on the show. We talked about Brendan Bussey with Carolina, and do you want to put all of your playoff hopes on the shoulders of a very talented but also very young and untested goaltender? So it's a lot to put on those shoulders for sure. We got to talk about Nikita Kucherov here. Since January 1st, nobody has scored more than Kucherov. He's got 53 points in 24 games. He has a 13-point lead over the next best player in that span, a guy you may have heard of named Connor McDavid. So Nathan MacKinnon is still right now the heavy betting favorite to win the Hart Trophy, of course. He's minus 200 odds at BetMGM, but Kucherov is now the closest to him at plus 260. So right now, I mean, Mike, which player do you think is more deserving of the Hart Trophy, MacKinnon or Kucherov?
Well, I mean, I think it's a horse race because, I mean, you look at Colorado and their record throughout the season, but they've faded a little bit after the Olympic break. But Tampa Bay, I mean, they've been able to have remarkable success, especially in January and then February and March. And a lot of it has been without Hedman, without a number of key players, but Kucherov has been there, and Kucherov has succeeded without a great supporting cast. I mean, MacKinnon has everybody. He has Natchez, he has Makar. So if you were putting them side by side, you would say that the record of Kucherov without all of his helpers is maybe slightly better than MacKinnon. But I think right now it's probably a 50-50 race. It'll be very close. Probably some votes. McDavid will steal some votes. But, I mean, it's one of those too close to call matchups. I don't know if I could, if I have to, if you're pointing a gun to my head, I'll say MacKinnon will win, but Kucherov is gaining on him, and the last 15 to 20 games of the season could be the difference between one winning and the other winning.
Yeah, both having incredible seasons, of course. Kucherov and what the Lightning have been able to do just in general. I think ever since Steven Stamkos left in free agency, there was sort of maybe that assumption that they might start to drop off. That might be sort of the end of their window, but they're still surging and looking like one of the teams to beat right now in that playoff race. We talk about Kucherov and then, of course, McDavid being the next player behind him. But then surprisingly, behind Kucherov and McDavid, the player with the third most points since January 1st is Evan Bouchard. So he's got 38 points in 24 games for the Edmonton Oilers. He's on pace right now to put up a career best 94 points this season, which would be a higher career total than either Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes have ever put up in their careers. So definitely some good company there. So there's only 6 defensemen in NHL history that have had a 100-point season. So guys like Bobby Orr, Paul Coffey, think those kinds of names. But if you're looking at Bouchard potentially getting to 94, I mean, why not 100? Do you think that Bouchard could reach that 100-point mark this year?
It's possible. I mean, obviously with McDavid and Draisaitl driving the offense, and he gets primary or secondary assists and his shot on the power play, he could get to that point. He could have a couple really massive games, like he had a 5-point game earlier in the year. If he has a couple of those, then it's very obtainable. But I just have to say the list of the players that you mentioned, most or all of them won Norris trophies. Evan Bouchard is never winning a Norris Trophy. He is a hack defensively. He is one of the worst defensemen defensively in the NHL. Now, he doesn't get called on it because he's so great offensively, and he has that booming shot from the point. But Erik Karlsson was the last defenseman to have 100 points, and Erik Karlsson has won 3 Norris trophies. But Erik Karlsson, you can never confuse Erik Karlsson and Rod Langway. They're just two completely different players. Erik Karlsson, his offense is his defense. His puck possession is his defense. You could say the same thing with Evan Bouchard, but the problem is positionally, I've seen him get completely turned into a pretzel by average forwards. So he's somebody that, great, he scores 100 points. I would rather have him score 80 points and be better defensively. And I think we see Edmonton's problems, especially in the playoffs, with them defending, and it happens in the regular season as well. And one of the reasons why is because Evan Bouchard is logging big minutes and is a liability on the back end.
Yeah, that's a good point. We talk about the Oilers quite a bit here with their struggles defensively, and Bouchard, a big part of that. I think, like you said, he can be the point guy on the power play and he can score a lot of goals, rack up the points, but he is a liability defensively. And I think that's just sort of illustrative of a larger problem in Edmonton. Of course, staying in the West, want to talk about Cutter Gauthier. So he is one of the young stars on the Anaheim Ducks, a team that is full of several young stars, but Gauthier has really taken a huge step this year. He is currently leading the team in goals with 32 and points with 57. So this is all coming at a very good time for Gauthier, considering he is due for a new contract at the end of the season. So if you're looking at him, of course, becoming a restricted free agent, and we've talked about the cap going up and all of these sort of new elements going into this and these negotiations, what do you think could be maybe a ballpark figure for what Gauthier could be earning on his next contract?
First of all, the thing that we talked about ad nauseum over the summer, the Mason McTavish extension, and he signed for $7 million. The reason that Pat Verbeek was so vehement on getting him at a certain number was because of what was going to happen this summer, which is not only Gauthier, but Leo Carlsson also being a restricted free agent. You got two of your best players coming up for big contracts. I think the offer sheet possibility out there is moot because Anaheim will just match it. They have enough cap space that they can, but it's a question of whether Verbeek can get both of those players signed for what is a reasonable amount. And the thing is, it may be a situation like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews in Chicago, where they signed for the same amount of term. Maybe they give up some money to have the term being shorter so they can become unrestricted free agents earlier on in their career. If I had to guess, because Granlund and Mason McTavish are both making $7 million, and they're the highest paid forward, I think Carlsson and Gauthier are going to blow past that. I would probably say 9 to 9.5 a year, and I think both of them will have to sign that. They'll sign the same amount. They'll try to get them at the same amount. Otherwise, I think it's going to create a little friction. But I would guess 9.5 for, say, 5 or 6 years.
This is coming at a good time. I mean, not just for Gauthier, but for the Ducks in general, I think, as they're looking to take that next step in their rebuild. They're on the cusp of actually being competitive now, could sneak into the playoffs here, and they're, looking to build around that young core, and you want to keep that young core in place and get them locked in as much as you can. I think that if you look at Gauthier, he's definitely a part of that. And with the cap going up, right at the same time that he's due for a new contract, very convenient timing for Anaheim, I think. And I think that's a good bet, blowing past that $7 million figure that McTavish is making. Sticking in the West, of course, we've got to talk about the Vancouver Canucks, a team that we've talked about quite a bit here on the show, although not always for the best reasons this season. Ian McIntyre recently spoke with Brock Boeser, winger for the Canucks, about where he stands on the state of the team and his commitment to being part of a rebuild. Of course, Boeser signed long-term in Vancouver, but this is a team that is now among the worst in the NHL and looking to embark on a rebuild here. So Boeser said, quote, "I'm not going to ask for a trade. That's not who I am as a person. Maybe we see how things are in the summer. Obviously, everyone has their meetings and talk it over and make sure you fit in where they want. There's a lot of things to talk about and figure out, but I'm committed to being here, and that is my goal." So Boeser seems bought in based on that, on sticking around long term. He's 29 years old. He, again, just signed that 7-year extension this past summer. So, Mike, do you think the Canucks will be just as interested in keeping him around by the end of the season? Or do you think they're going to be more inclined to really commit to that rebuild, which means selling off their tradable pieces?
Well, I mean, they're going to have to do a lot of swaying of Boeser because it doesn't sound like he's going to make it easy for them. I mean, they gave him the no move clause. It's, basically now, he can choose where he wants to go. He's a good scoring forward at a very affordable $7.25 million. So I'm sure there will be teams out there who are looking for offense that would be interested, but he controls the process. So, you could say, he could say, I want to go to Minnesota. Well, they're not going to get full value for him because he controls the process. If he's open to, going to 3 or 4 or 5 different places, then Patrick Allvin might be able to generate a market and get a good return for him. He didn't have that problem with Quinn Hughes because Quinn Hughes didn't have any. I don't believe he had any no trade protection on his deal, and the same goes with Elias Pettersson. He's got no move protection too. It's very strange how the Canucks have buyer's remorse on these players so quickly after signing them. Maybe the thought process of actually signing them was flawed, but now they're stuck with, Pettersson, who is not an $11.6 million player anymore, trying to find a home for him. With Boeser, I don't think they'll have a lot of trouble, but like I said, he controls the process, and I don't think if they do insist on trading him and do a full teardown rebuild that they're going to get full value. They'll get pennies on the dollar for him.
Yeah, you question whether Pettersson's an $11.6 million player anymore. I might argue that he never was in the first place. But I think that, yeah, those are some big contracts. Like you said, maybe not buyer's remorse so much with Boeser, but given where the team is right now, you probably do have some remorse for giving him that movement protection, at least with the state of the team right now. And a lot of teams could be interested in Boeser. We saw that during free agency last summer. There were a lot of teams interested in Boeser, so could be something to keep an eye on here. But like you said, not sure that they are going to have an easy go of it trying to find a new home for Brock Boeser if the Canucks decide to go that way. Mike, we got to talk about your Buffalo Sabres. They are now really firmly in this playoff race. And earlier, actually, before the show, you said they're ruining my plans for the spring. They're actually going to make it to the playoffs. Who would have thought the Buffalo Sabres in the playoffs? Of course, that is due in large part to several players having career best offensive seasons in Buffalo. So 7 players to be exact: Jack Quinn, Ryan McLeod, Josh Doan, Zach Benson, Peyton Krebs, Bo and Byram, and Matthias Samuelsson, all on pace having career seasons with the Buffalo Sabres. So looking at those guys, I mean, does anyone stand out to you as one that's been the most surprising contributor to this offensive push from the Sabres this season? Anyone who you maybe weren't really expecting to have the kind of season that they have been?
It's easy on this one. It's Matthias Samuelsson, because Matthias Samuelsson has been known primarily as a defensive defenseman for most of his career, playing partnered with Rasmus Dahlin, who is the offensive guy. He had 7 career goals going into this season, and he's got 12 this season, which is he's stepped into the offense. He has found himself involved in the offense a lot more. He's got a big shot, and he's just had good hunting luck. So, I mean, there are other players on that list that I think are slightly less surprising. Quinn is a first-round pick. He's got a big shot. You expect him to finally get around and start to score. McLeod has grown offensively in his role since he was acquired from Edmonton. You could say Josh Doan, but I saw Josh Doan have some early success with Arizona. He had one sort of subpar year with Utah, and he was included in the deal for JJ Peterka, and he's having a big year, and he earned a big contract. But no one expected Matthias Samuelsson to score 12 goals. No one.
Yeah, very impressive season he's having. And like you said, with Alex Tuch not even on that list of players having career best seasons right now. And like we said earlier, he's already going to be set to cash in here in free agency once the offseason starts. But really exciting to see what the Sabres are putting together. Suddenly they're the team nobody wants to face. Again, never thought we'd see the day, but definitely exciting times in Buffalo. Finally today, want to wrap up talking about the Ottawa Senators. So, news coming out this week, the Senators have had their 2026 draft pick, their first round pick, returned to them after the NHL modified their penalty that came with a botched trade involving Evgeny Dadonov. So, just by way of review, when the Senators traded Dadonov to Vegas in July 2021, his contract's 10-team no-trade clause wasn't disclosed to the Golden Knights. So then months later, when the Golden Knights tried to trade Dadonov to Anaheim, they were unaware that the Ducks were on that list of no trade teams, and Dadonov had submitted that list to Ottawa, but Ottawa had not submitted it to Vegas at the time of the trade. So if you can follow along with all of that, Ottawa was at fault. They were penalized for not supplying that no trade list, which led to that canceled trade between Vegas and Anaheim. The penalty was that Ottawa was going to lose their 2026 first round pick. Well, it would have been 2026, 25, or 24. They would have to lose their first round pick in one of those drafts. So this year would have been the year. It would have been the final year for that to happen. But the NHL has reversed that penalty. They've said now Ottawa will still get a first round pick in 2026, but it will be the final pick in the first round, no matter what happens, even if they're in the lottery. Regardless, it'll be null and void. The Senators will pick 32nd in the first round of the 2026 NHL draft. In addition to that, they have to pay a $1 million fine, which will go to charity. So, Mike, what do you make of this decision? Are you surprised by the reversal from the NHL? And what do you kind of make of the timing of this, with this being the final year that the Senators would have had to serve that penalty?
Well, there's precedent in this decision, and I say it's precedent of the NHL being spineless when it comes to penalizing teams for going outside the rules. If you remember, Ilya Kovalchuk and the New Jersey Devils, they signed him to a 17-year contract, and that circumvented the salary cap, and they took the Devils' first-round pick away from them, but then they decided to give it back to them. I don't understand why. I mean, a lot of people thought, well, it's because Lou Lamoriello was the general manager and he's well liked in the league and he tried to get away with something and they didn't want to penalize Lou. And maybe there was something to that. That was just, speculation. In this instance, the Senators played the long game. They deferred on the 24 pick. They deferred on the 25 pick. They had an ownership change from the Melnick family to Michael Andlauer. They had a difference. They fired the GM that made the deal, Pierre Dorian, and Steve Stais is now the general manager. And they made the case that was a previous administration. That was not us. We didn't do it. We shouldn't be held responsible. That's bunk. It's your organization that did it. You took, you took that organization for better or for worse, and this was part of it. And the NHL, I don't understand why they went back on this. I mean, it was clear that they circumvented and they were at fault for the not revealing the no trade clause, and they in a way put Vegas in a big pickle at that point. So I mean, I don't think that the penalty should have been reversed. It should have been a first round pick taken away. Now you could say, well, they've been penalized enough by it being put 32nd. But still, it's a pick in the first round. So I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I don't like why the NHL keeps going back on decisions that were correct. But it's par for the course with the NHL.
Yeah, 32nd pick still, like you said, a pick in the first round in a deep draft class this year as well in 2026. So Ottawa is still going to make their pick, again, regardless of where they finish in the standings, whether they make the playoffs or not. Any of that does not matter. They are picking 32nd in the 2026 draft. Once they pay that $1 million fine as well, the books are clean, and all of this convoluted trade mess will be put behind us. But for now, we will have to keep an eye on where Ottawa finishes in the standings and see how much of a penalty this really is to them to have their pick come at the end of the first round. Of course, if you want to read more about the Ottawa Senators or any of the teams or players that we've talked about on the show today, please head over to the Hockey News. The Hockey News has been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. That is going to do it for today's episode of The Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and listening to us talking some hockey today. We always do appreciate it. We will be back with an all-new episode next Tuesday. But for now, for Michael Augello, I'm Emma Lingan. This is The Wraparound, and we will see you next time.